This is the story of the French Revolution.
In 1770, King Louis XVI of France married the Austrian princess Marie Antoinette. The people became hopeful that the fresh new monarchs might change their current economic disaster. In the beautiful courts of Versailles, the king and princess were wed in an elaborate ceremony, happy despite the darkening weather. Oblivious or simply ignoring France's near-collapsing state, Marie led a fancy, perfumed lifestyle, getting fitted daily for new dresses from the finest tailors in all the region. She held lavishing parties and was very interested in the glittering life at the court. Loving fine things caused her to spend money extravagantly, which made her very unpopular in the eyes of the people. She loved the shimmering way that the French royals lived, but offended many aristocrats because of her attitude towards the French culture. Louis XVI, immature and slow, was not interested in governing, but his word was law. He was a schlub and loved food, and even when France was in a crisis, he did little to improve the conditions. Even though he seemed to have good intentions, he didn't particularly have a good understanding of the problems in France. This would eventually cause France to spiral down, ultimately leading Louis to his death.
As people suffered from poverty, they decided to take action, which caused the fall of Bastille. In Paris, as the price of bread grew higher, riots broke out, attacking the city's prisons in order to free political prisoners. Then, on July 14, 1789, after the tennis court oath but before the March of Versailles, a great mob made up of Parisian crowds attacked the royal prison located in Paris, known as the Bastille. It all began because of the tennis court oath, when Robespierre formed the new National Assembly, swearing that they would not stop meeting until they had a new government. This was the first action they took after the oath. Once the 7 prisoners in Bastille were released, the mob tortured Governor Delany and paraded his head on a stick in celebration.
This action had come about because since long ago the Bastille had been known for being a place where people were tortured to death in unthinkable ways. It was a symbol of oppression and abuse of monarchy, forever reminding the people of those horrible times. In order to prove that they were strong enough to change the old ways, the mob destroyed the Bastille, tearing it apart brick by brick as a sign of victory, even selling the bricks in memory of their triumph. This can be known as the beginning of the French Revolution.
Its significance marked the day of triumph, justice, and liberty. Before the revolution, the Bastille had prevented everything the people wanted: liberty, equality, and fraternity. The Bastille was a symbol of power, terror, and a representative of the absolute rule of a monarchy. It changed the country enormously, because by destroying the Bastille, they had demolished a dreadful place that had brought back horrific memories of the past. It represented the power of the king being abolished by the National Assembly. If it hadn't been destroyed, the techniques of killing used in the Bastille might still be presented. By tearing down the Bastille, the people had slowly begun gaining their freedom back and changing France into how they had always hoped it to be. It made them realize that they can make changes to the country and that they really could attain their desires. Alas, we have taken righteous action. After years of starvation and living no better than the dogs upon the streets, we have finally started our regime of freedom. While the nobility, who inherit wealth and riches by bloodline, we, the peasants, face an inexplicable horrors of this brutal cold world. Suffering under severe poverty with our families begging and crying for bread, we will take no more of this injustice. My fellow comrades trapped within the bloody dungeons and cages of the Bastille finally saw sunlight after so many days. That dreaded jail encasing our freedoms and rights were torn and demolished to nothing but rubble and dirt. Our words were finally defended by our spears and swords. It was a tragic day. The system had been overthrown and all the guards, including my darling brother. The heroic way they defended the king's power, only to be pierced and sliced by the beast that is the lower estate. How absolutely terrible! What monstrous decision they have made to attack the Bastille. They do not work hard enough and always complain and riot in the streets for their own cynical needs. I hope that my heart and His Majesty will arrest these brutes for their villainous actions.
August 4th, 1789 indicated a day of great change. The National Assembly had met in Versailles and brought an end to serfdom. This brought people the thought that because the king lived in Versailles, he was beginning to become out of touch with the conditions in the cities. They believed that in order to solve the problems of Paris, the king needed to return to Paris and rule, instead of being isolated in his palace. As prices of bread grew higher, the market woman grew infuriated. So, on October 5, 1789, crowds of muscular women armed with weapons marched around 50 kilometers to the king's palace in Versailles. As they walked, many others joined them and their numbers grew to 20,000. When they arrived in Versailles, they stormed the palace, massacring Marie Antoinette's guards and putting their heads on sticks. They proposed that the king sign the Declaration of the Rights of Man and return to Paris to rule. Before long, the king and queen unwillingly agreed to return to Paris to govern. This event is significant because it shows that the people were strong and had enough power to control the king and queen, and that they did have the power to change the government. The march symbolized a new balance of power that took away the privileged orders of the nobility in France. The march to Versailles showed that women had political influence, and it also signified a step towards equality between men and women.
Ah, 'tis a remarkable day. Our revolution burns with fiery passion and zeal. Across the land we are joined by many other women, faces ashen with grief and labor, but under the scars and dirt shine an ambition brighter than gold. The miles seem like but a few steps as we stand in front of the gates of Versailles, a bejeweled pigpen of arrogance and mockery. Our victory, hard won and deserved, came to us when the monarchs were imprisoned into their carriages as we marched back to Paris, calling out in pride.
What barbarian acts were committed upon such a fine day? Troops of bedraggled and filthy women intruded like swine into His Majesty's beautiful court. They do not even know what deep matters they had been penetrated after the king's soldiers gathered up once again. They'll all be defeated. This laughing revolution will be but a joke in the future. This is nothing but foolishness and unnecessary bloodshed of their part. Just wait. Within months or even weeks, they shall all be cold in the earth.
Louis XVI, King of France, came into reign in 1774. He ruled depending solely on his own judgment, even though he was not prepared. Because of his ignorance and contempt for the rights of man, his popularity began to decrease, and eventually led to his execution. On January 20th, 1793, after returning to Paris as a result of the March of Versailles, he was found guilty. When he had returned to Paris with Mary, held prisoner, they had tried to escape in disguise, seeking to go to Austria for help so that they would attack France, restoring the monarchy. But before long, they were recognized at Varennes and imprisoned once again. The people were furious that Louis would hope for Austria to attack France and Mary's letters to them, which was treason, and even though they didn't have evidence, they knew that something had to be done. 2 years later, in November, evidence of Louis's counter-revolutionary intrigues with Austria was discovered. On the day before his execution, the 20th of January, he was tried by the National Convention, found guilty of treason, and sentenced to death by the guillotine. On January 21st, 1793, the king was guillotined, and not long after, Mary suffered the same fate in October. This event is significant because it signifies the day that the revolution was made complete. It was the ultimate overthrowing of the old system of government, and the act declared the right of people to make decisions for themselves. Louis's execution put an end to the absolute monarchy in France and gave it a chance to start anew.
'Tis a glorious day. Finally, our tyrannic king has been overthrown. Such a favor has the good Lord shown us, endowing our lives with the kindling spirit that is Robespierre. The king is dead. Our lives will be forever different. Robespierre has turned the whole of the lower class against us. Their numbers outweigh us by thousands. Many of us have already fled, yet leaving means forsaking our wealth and land.
Push it over. It didn't work. You can't let the people fall. Oh, okay. No,